Triple J should be sold and there should be ads on the ABC. Simple. Because when we get to the model of the ABC, and it's very important to understand the history of where the Australian Broadcasting Corporation comes from in terms of its commencement as back in 1932 as the Australian Broadcasting Commission, and further back in history as the National Broadcasting Service in 1928, you understand that it was established to fill a gap in the market. Because we're talking about a period of Australian history where the media was just emerging. That cricket scores weren't broadcast live from Lords, they were actually sent by telegram. And the radio wireless operators would read out the telegrams as if they were live scores being replayed from London. Now, the media market has moved on since then, Mr Acting Deputy President. That was 90 years ago. Since then, we've seen this wonderful thing invented called the internet, which means every device like this, Mr Acting Deputy President, is a device for us to seek news, to be a purveyor of news, to transmit news, and to give an informed opinion on the world. I mean, I was, during a particularly boring part of the Senate when one of the Greens was speaking before Mr Acting Deputy President, I was reading the Times online and the Daily Telegraph, seeing the latest that's happening from overseas in terms of what's happening over there. Very, very, very important. And what we find is this very patronising approach from those on the left who think there has to be a taxpayer-funded national broadcasting service. There actually doesn't have to be a taxpayer-funded national broadcasting service. In my home state of Queensland, back in the 1920s, we had taxpayer-owned butcher shops. We had, even in the town of Babinda, there was a government-owned pub. Society has moved on since then. And the failure of the ABC and of the board, including the chair, is a failure to understand how Australians get their news and that there is a plurality in the media market. And for the ABC to constantly and consistently portray themselves as being the sole arbiter of all that is right and justice in this world is just an example of this poor sanctimonious approach that they take to people who do live outside the Canberra bubble. Now, what the ABC fail to understand, especially when they don't understand those on the centre-right of politics, is that I don't want a right-wing ABC. I don't want a left-wing ABC. If there is to be an ABC, it should be an impartial national broadcaster. But sadly, the ABC consistently fails to understand that people voted for Scott Morrison as Prime Minister. People like Scott Morrison as Prime Minister. And the ABC just don't get that. And when I ask the question, name one Conservative commentator or journalist on the ABC, and the left go feral and they go, why are you asking that question? It's because consistently there are no Conservative commentators or journalists on the ABC. I just want one Conservative commentator on the ABC. Just please, just one. Just give me one. And the fact the ABC consistently fail to do that shows to me that they are snubbing those quiet, aspirational Australians. So the question must be, Mr Acting Deputy President, then why should the taxpayers pay for it? Why should the taxpayers pay for a national broadcasting service that fails to consistently appreciate how most Australians live their lives? Now, I'm someone who actually is a fan of the ABC. I like the ABC. And I think the ABC should be reformed to save itself. I think we need to sell all off their inner-city headquarters, sell off Ultimo, that grand palace that would make a German prince blush, sell off the headquarters in Brisbane and Sydney and move all of the staff out of the CBDs to the suburbs. And Queensland would love to see the ABC staff based in Beenleigh or Burpengary or further west, Fargo-Minda, somewhere like that. Get out of the CBD. And that'll help those staff realise that latte bubble is not how most Australians live. Secondly, I do think the ABC, there should be a review, there should be a review of the Charter and the Governing Act, and there hasn't been a detailed review for some time. And that review should look into what is the purpose of a taxpayer-funded national broadcasting service, and if there is to be one, should there be ads on it? I think there should be ads on the ABC. There are ads on the SBS, and certainly the quality of programming on SBS has not been diluted in any way or form. But also, Triple J should be sold, because it goes to why was the ABC set up in the first place? It was set up to fill a gap in the market. Now, the Triple J, is, by all accounts, I'm told, a successful radio station that garners towards a particular demographic, especially those 15 to 25. And funnily enough, those between the ages of 15 and 25 actually have quite a lot of money to spend. So you'd find that advertisers would be very keen to advertise on Triple J, and it could be self-funding. So why don't we just sell it off and let it be self-funded, and you'll still have that quality music that those opposite seem so obsessed with. But it would mean the taxpayers aren't funding Triple J. And the third point of how we should reform the ABC, and this goes to the recruitment of their staff. And there are many fine and good people who work at the ABC, and I acknowledge that. But there is a groupthink that has taken over that organisation that has got particularly worse. These are staff who sort of work together. They're lovely people, but they think the same. They think the same in terms of how Scott Morrison should not be Prime Minister. It's this Scott Morrison sort of derangement syndrome. They can't believe that Bill Shorten didn't win the last election and that Scott Morrison somehow is Prime Minister. And they've never, ever come to terms with that. And we see that, most particularly, Mr Acting Deputy President, with some of the recent programs. I'm just going to mention Four Corners a couple of weeks ago, where Four Corners attacked the Prime Minister because he has a friend, and this friend has some, as I think the Prime Minister, I will say, some wacky views. And the Prime Minister was very strong in condemning the views of QAnon. But what the ABC failed to mention in this program, where they had someone on this program, is that one of the key witnesses is a serial conspiracy theorist who has twice been detained by the Fixated Persons Unit of the Queensland Police and admits he took part in the TV program to politically damage Scott Morrison. So here is the ABC allowing, quite frankly, a nut job to go on their so-called Premier Current Affairs program and attack the Prime Minister. But of course the ABC didn't say, oh, this person's been twice detained by the Queensland Police because, quite frankly, they're a nut job. They put them up on a pedestal. And this is what the ABC fails to understand, that those on the centre-right of politics are sick of you. And it is very dangerous for you in the ABC, because why should the taxpayers of this country continue to fund an organisation that continually derides and sells down those of us who have centre-right views? And I can tell you that the thought leaders in the centre-right community around Australia are also sick of the ABC. And so the ABC needs to reform itself. And the challenge is for Ita Buttrose to understand that the centre-right of the politics are continually and increasingly questioning the role of the ABC in modern society, and are actually questioning whether there is a need for the ABC. Now, in my maiden speech, I said if the ABC didn't reform itself, it should be privatised, but there should be a rural and regional broadcasting service. And so I repeat that today. I think it is time for the government to look into the ABC to whether it should be halved, we should have a rural and regional broadcasting service, and we sell off the rest. Because if the ABC won't reform itself, well, on behalf of the taxpayers of Australia who put $1 billion a year into this organisation, we want value for our money, and we're not getting it at the moment. Thank you.